Are you afraid of things that go bump in the night? In this first part of a two-part series, we're going to discuss Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Is he real? Stay tuned.
I think if you're into hiking and you've ever had some late nights hiking where you're not back to your car until like midnight or so, and I've had a few of those.
Yeah.
You can get kind of wigged out in the dark when you're on the trail, kind of freaking out back there, thinking about Bigfoot, aliens, lineal time, all this craziness. I would say I've been interested in some of these topics probably since I was a kid. Sometimes we have a surface level understanding of certain things and not understanding how much thought has gone into these topics for decades and decades and decades, in some cases even centuries. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to me.
I'm outdoors a lot. And sometimes, like you said, I get a chill, maybe when it's not so cold. The goosebumps. My hair stands on edge.
Yeah.
But I've got to call a little bit of fraud. I've been on 150 different trails.
Mm-hmm.
And other than, as a child, watching a movie called Harry and the Hendersons, I've never seen Sasquatch. And I'm upset about it. That is fraud because I'm out there every week.
Yeah.
Help me understand that, because maybe I'm not looking in the right places. Maybe I'm wearing the wrong deodorant. Like, there's got to be a reason, because I feel it, but I haven't seen it in person.
Well, I'll tell you, anytime you're outside, you're alone, it's dark. There are natural reasons why you're a little on edge, why you're a little pensive. You get into some like, for instance, if you're hunting. I used to love hunting. I mean, it was every fall. This time of year going into fall, this was one of the most exciting times of year because you're getting ready for hunting season. And it was just wonderful. But I've had to walk through graveyards before to get to my hunting destination in the woods. It's terrifying. I don't care what anybody says. You're loaded. I bow hunt, so you have your bow, maybe a sidearm, and you're going through a graveyard into the woods, and you hear all these noises. And a lot of that's because we don't spend our lives in the woods, walking through the woods. But not really. I mean, we go out there for hunting, we go out there for recreation, but we live in the comfort of a home. We live in the comfort around other people and feeling safe. But in the woods, you feel pensive, and all of a sudden your eyes start playing tricks on you. You start seeing things, and of course you hear the stories, which puts ideas in your head. I've never seen Bigfoot. I do know some people who claim to have seen something, but the more that I'm in the woods, the less, it's not that the less special it is. I love being in nature. I absolutely love it. But especially with satellite imagery and all the things that we have at our disposal, it's becoming more and more difficult for me to even take the subject seriously without kind of laughing and going, oh, come on, don't be so gullible. That kind of, especially there in your neck of the woods, around not Watts Bar, I think, well, maybe it is Watts Bar. It's up 27, a few miles there. Watts Bar being one of them, but at that location there, the Oak Ridge facility, the stories and the rumors that come out of Oak Ridge, it's just hysterical because you are kind of out in the middle of nowhere there. I think it's called the Roosevelt Recreation Area.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of nowhere, and there were even rumors about an underground tunnel where submarines during World War II went from there in Tennessee out to the ocean, and people really believe that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm not buying it, Toby. I'm just not buying it. Maybe it's the same thing with me. Maybe it's the deodorant, the aftershave, whatever. But I've just never seen Bigfoot. Never even smelled a Bigfoot or seen a Bigfoot, whatever. Never, not once.
You mentioned satellite images. I'm in East Tennessee and you're in Virginia. I've come across moonshine stills before. They haven't caught those guys with satellites.
No, they haven't. But are they looking?
That's what the question for tonight is. Are they looking?
The government can't seem to hide anything. I can't, a government that can't balance its budget, it's hard for me to imagine that they could do something as responsible as locate, a pair of shoes under the bed, much less find some tall walking thing or entity through the woods and go, oh, we found it. And if they did find something like that and they tucked it away somewhere to do research, what would be the purpose in that? And surely out of all the people who would be a part of this research, nobody's going to come forward and say, this is what happened, here's my evidence, this is the proof that I have. Nobody, after all these years. I'm just not buying it. And I know a lot of people believe in Bigfoot. A lot of people believe in these things. But the problem that I have is the concept of believing in something. Now, maybe if belief is, if we take belief and we just trap it inside of our mind, thinking, I'm thinking about this subject, and we call that belief. Okay, then I can buy the idea of people believing in something like this. But belief, as far as evidence is concerned, and actually doing something about it, doing something involved with it, it's not there. So people say they believe in it, but what they really mean is they've got an active imagination and they want it to be true. They want that to be true. I think people are just projecting their imagination. That's what I think about Bigfoot in general. But with Bigfoot, I think it's just playing on the old haunted house trope, you know?
What about the plaster cast? How can you argue with the plaster cast? I've seen them. You've seen them. You talked to a Bigfoot expert on
Matt Sieber, who really is. And again, I don't have permission to share some of his specific thoughts, because if you talk to Matt, first of all, if there's an expert out there on all of the Bigfoot folklore, Matt Sieber, EastTennesseeBigfoot.org, the guy's an expert. He knows. He's been on the Bigfoot television shows. You know, but he has some different opinions and nuance about what he thinks that's not necessarily mainstream. But I'll let him share that. But plaster can be faked. Plaster can be faked. And man, if you're walking through the woods, there's all kinds of shapes and trees that are twisted certain ways, and the way the landscape looks. It makes your eyes, you know, you're trying so hard to make a shape into something that your brain says, okay, it's like looking at the clouds. You'll see the clouds and you'll see Snoopy in the clouds or see Elvis in the clouds. You know, you'll see these different shapes that give you the idea that there's a house, there's this, and it's your brain trying to make sense of the shape that it's seeing. And that happens in the woods all the time. So you're walking, you're looking at the ground, it looks like a Bigfoot. You pour plaster into these little indentions in the ground, you're like, hey, here's a Bigfoot. You know, and I'm not buying that it's an actual foot. It's not buying.
Oh, a lot of the Bigfoot sightings are the 1960s. LSD was a big deal back then.
True. I don't think there's a correlation though between, you know, the psychedelic movement of the 60s, and you know, I would say that some people have gotten a hold of some bad mushrooms before and probably seen Bigfoot and all kinds of things. But I think most of the stuff that people, even when it comes to hauntings and ghosts, it's their minds playing tricks on them. You have thoughts that are inserted by folklore. Folklore will continue, you know, you're bombarded with that from television and specials. And once there's that feeling of validation of, I know I saw something, because you're not in the woods that often. If you're going to see Bigfoot, it's going to be in West Virginia. I mean, I'm shocked still at how just in the middle of nowhere some of those locations are in West Virginia. And yet, you know, you see bear. You see a lot of bear. I think a lot of people, especially that they're not from the country, they don't live out in the mountains. They don't live, you know, out in the middle of nowhere. Or they don't hunt. They're not. They see bear in a zoo. So then they take that hiking trip in the summer, you know, and they go hiking and they see a bear walking on two legs, which they do all the time. Bear walk on their hind legs all the time, and you see it through the woods, and you go, oh, "There's Sasquatch." And then you're talking about being, you know, a lot of the Bigfoot sightings were in the 60s, but we're actually in a Bigfoot craze right now. Right now, I mean, it dominates popular opinion. People are all the time, they're saying, Bill, you got to do a video on YouTube, or got to do a Bigfoot video on YouTube. You got to do a video about this. I'm like, that's not really what our channel does. So Carolyn has a joke. Every time we go somewhere in the mountains, there's always a statue of Bigfoot, which is weird. But there's, you know, you'll be at a ski resort, snowshoe ski resort in West Virginia. There's a Bigfoot, you know, everywhere. So I'm always videoing it. So people, I think, have assumed sometimes that I'm a Bigfoot guy, and it's like, well, no, not really at all. But it's just fascinating of how many people are into Bigfoot, or air quotes here, believe in Bigfoot.